those products for the bone formation. Now I have an erythroblast that came from my colony-forming unit from my stem cell. And that will give me a red blood cell. Once that red blood cell gets formed, it migrates to the bloodstream. At that point, it is called immature, the reticulocyte. So the reticulocyte is an immature red blood cell, meaning it's got the organelles. As it travels in the blood for about 3-4 days, okay, it will begin to mature, and then while it's doing that, producing those proteins. And once it is packed full, and I mean packed full of proteins, it'll spit out the organelles so that the only thing that happens is it gets to fly, move around in the bloodstream, and do the job of those proteins. That's it. So when it's fully mature, we have the erythrocyte. Cyte, remember that? Blasts, cytes, clasts, okay? Now, how is it that the body gets information to make the red blood cells? Well, that's kind of interesting because their number one job, oxygen. Oxygen, 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 oxygen. So in this system, kidneys become important. Can you figure out any reason why based on our anatomy? My heart beats. When it beats, the blood either goes to the lungs or goes into the aorta to begin its trek around the body. When it goes over the aortic arch and begins its descent down by way of our thoracic and abdominal aorta, what is the first organ it hits? My kidneys. Oh boy, wait till we get to the chapter on the kidneys. They are amazing. Getting ready to say a word I shouldn't say. They are amazing. Now, the blood flow to them, when I talk about extreme high flow rate through the kidneys, so therefore they have the ability to detect levels of oxygen in the blood. My kidneys have the ability to detect the levels of oxygen in the blood. If they find at any point in time a decrease in the oxygen levels, they can secrete erythropoietin. erythropoietin production, and guess where it'll make its way?
Kidneys?
The red bone marrow. So if my kidneys produce the erythropoietin, that is picked up by targets on cells that will have receptors for it. Once again, going back to my colony forming units, okay? This one for the erythrocytes. It can stimulate that production of the red blood cells. The whole process takes about 3 to 5 days. So this is why when someone may have a high amount of blood loss, they may have to be given blood. Why? Well, they will get the production. It'll just take it a while. So in that time frame that they have lost the blood and they need for the production to start, but I got to have time for it to get to the mature cell, okay? So if I'm given the blood that contains red blood cells, what do those red blood cells have on them? The hemoglobin, which can do what? Transport oxygen to the tissues. The reason you have to have this, okay, if oxygen decreases to the tissues, you are risking the death of the cell. And if too many of the cells die, the tissue dies. So therefore, in the cases of high blood loss, if it doesn't get replaced in time, the tissues of the body can begin to die. Yes, the kidneys might function and start getting the erythropoietin, but guess what the kidneys are? Tissue with cells that need oxygen. And if I don't have enough of it, guess what?
The tissue dies.
They're going to die also. So that's why someone who might have had a huge blood loss, they supplement it with the blood infusion. Does that make sense? So that product that is so important in that red blood cell, that protein, the hemoglobin. Do you guys remember when you talked about the production of protein? Basically, the production of protein is where there is a gene on a chromosome, and it will code for that protein. In the process of making protein, it gives the information for the amino acids to be strung together. When the amino acids in their primary structure, that is simply stringing together of the amino acids. Don't forget, amino acids are held together by peptide bonds. Now, once we get the amino acid chain, because of little groups that are found on it, that amino chain could either fold, like you'd fold a piece of paper to make a fan, okay, or it could twist, like a double helix. That was my secondary structure. When that folding or bending folded in on itself, That was my tertiary structure. When you put together two or more tertiary structures, meaning that amino acid string that has been all twisted, okay? When you put two or more together, you get a quaternary structure. Hemoglobin is 4 put together. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these chains that have both the tertiary structures together. See how they're showing purple, purple, gold, gold? Okay. Alpha, beta, alpha, beta. All right. Look at how many amino acids long those chains are. My alpha chains are only 141. How many did it take to generate or bring in, like the bases? Do you guys remember the bases? To pull an amino acid in? Only 3. So this is not a long DNA sequence. All right? It's actually very short. And anybody know someone who might suffer from sickle cell disorder? Sickle cell disease? Yeah, I know a lot of people too. And sickle cell disease is when that hemoglobin and that red blood cell, what happens is it doesn't form correctly. And that red blood cell takes on different shapes. That becomes very detrimental to the people. It went wrong at the 6th amino acid. The 6th one. Because these chains are not very long. Now their job, okay? Each one, we need to bind a heme group. So in each one of the 4, I have my heme group. That heme group, okay, has an iron atom in the center of it. That iron atom in the center of that heme group attached to one of those protein chains, okay, can bind an oxygen molecule. Every hemoglobin molecule in the red blood cell can bind up to 4 oxygens. Now, CO2. Here's what happens with the CO2 from the extracellular fluid. The product, the waste that comes from cellular respiration. CO2, carbon dioxide, can bind to an area on the chain. It does not bind to the heme group. CO2 can be carried on the chain. It doesn't want to carry it that way, all right? But it can, because the hemoglobin in that red blood cell, it wants to carry oxygen. Now, carbon monoxide, which is what?
Poisonous.
Poisonous gas.